Hey, how you doing? Welcome to Notcast episode 55. 55. Can't believe it, but this lockdown, it's a long thing. I can't believe how long the lockdown is actually, but it doesn't matter whether we believe in it or not. As Philip K. Dick said about reality is that which when you stop believing in it doesn't go away. It is Monday. I think it's it's Monday the 8th of February 2021. And this is episode 55. Previously, yesterday, I did stick up a poll and I asked, well, what would you like me to talk about? And I had band t-shirts, Birmingham Indie from 1987 to 2000. And the year 2000 was when I left Birmingham and moved to London. Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, and something else which I can't remember. The overwhelming winner for that was band t-shirts, I think. But unfortunately, I've forgotten to put what I was really keen on, which was to talk about some of my favourite horror movies and why I really like them, and perhaps to give you a bit of a flavour as to where I'm going with this. I'm going to show you some of the films I'm not going to be mentioning because they're obvious. So first and foremost, you're not going to be hearing me talk about The Wicker Man, because frankly there's only one Mark that can talk about The Wicker Man, and that ain't me. I'm not going to talk about The Exorcist, because good as it is, every man and his dog has heard about The Exorcist. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that's quite good, but it's what I call a gorno, and I think I'll explain what that is now. Gorno is for me kind of like a cross between gore and pornography. And by the way, I've got a small cat over there that is really keen on being in shots. You might see him later on. But Gorno is kind of like just exploitative body parts, blood, guts, all that type of stuff. And to me, that stuff isn't that horrific, really. It's more just kind of like watching an episode of Casualty with screaming as opposed to horror. Horror for me is a thing that really sticks in your head and stays with you once the film has finished. And some of the films which I'm not mentioning are great films if you like shots of amputated body parts. They're not so great if you want ideas that are actually horrific. So, The Evil Dead, that's good, but again, every man in his Exorcist knows about that. Videodrome from the golden horror summer of 1983 is a great movie, but it's not going to get mentioned today. John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness is a great horror movie, but I'm not going to mention that, primarily because I'm trying to limit myself to one film per director. I'm sure you can guess which John Carpenter film I'm going to be mentioning. Steven Spielberg and Joe Dante's Gremlins is a great horror movie, but doesn't make the cut because we've all known it. A couple of others I'm not going to mention, one of which is the Blair Witch Project, because if you haven't heard about the Blair Witch Project, dude, were you even there? As lots of letters to the Melody Maker and the Enemy used to have it, and also It Follows, which is a great movie, but it just didn't make the cut. So I'm going to talk through some horror films that I think are absolutely great and why I think they're absolutely great. And there's an order to which I'm going to start in, so I'm going to start with the oldest one first. This is Fritz Lang's M, which was made in 1931 and 1932. And the reason it was, I say, 2 years is because two versions of the film were shot, one in English and one in German. The version in German is about 20 minutes longer. This is a very disturbing film, made as an allegory between and around the rise of fascism. It's also, by the way, is the first film with a serial killer in that I know of, and the first film that's a police procedural. So it's launched probably every single Netflix documentary ever. It's a terrifying film because it's a black and white film with Peter Lorre in it. You will know his face, even if you don't know his name. And in it he plays a child murderer, which for the 1930s was pretty shocking actually. This film was rated PG, which, considering the subject matter, is really surprising. It shouldn't be rated PG. It's got no murders, it's got no death, it's got no bloodied shots or anything like that. It's all atmosphere around motifs and ideas and shots which indicate the absence of a person. So the horror, you never see the horror in the same way that in Seven you never see what's in the box. But what you see instead is illusion, and you see suggestion, and it's really really scary. And there's also a subplot around mob rule and how mobs work, and how they rush to criticise and convict people without actually having any evidence to do so. This is a horrific film, and it's very very scary, because it's scary about its insight into human nature, and well worth watching if you get an opportunity to do it. Go for the German version. The English version is poorly dubbed. It's probably the best way of putting it, is even though the film was shot twice, once with English language and once with German language, the English language dub has very little in the way of sound effects, and sound effects are really where the atmosphere is at. I've forgotten a film which I should have put in my pile, so I'm going to have to go downstairs and get it. I'll be right. This is the second film, and the one which I had forgotten and left downstairs. It is 10 Rillington Place from 1971. Oh god, this film's hard. It's a dramatisation and a film adaptation of the murderer John Reginald Christie, who lived at 10 Rillington Place, and it was made only a few years after the murders themselves actually happened. It was shot on Rillington Place. It was shot a couple of houses away from where the murders actually happened before the street was demolished. John Hurt is fantastic in this. Richard Attenborough as Reginald Christie, the murderer, is chilling. And if you've seen Silence of the Lambs, you've seen everything that Richard Attenborough was doing, but not quite so good. It's terrifying because it's real, it's banal, and it's a snapshot to a time that obviously can no longer exist. But it's a very, very powerful, very scary film. And for me, horror is something that lives in our minds. It isn't shots of bodies, it isn't people being thrown into rivers or being devoured by huge gaping maws. Horror is about something that lives in you. It's about the terror that exists within people and the cruelty that exists within people. And 10 Rillington Place is a horror film. But again, if you get your rocks off seeing people having their legs cut off, no, you're not going to enjoy it. Next one is this. Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation from 1974. So this was written in 1966, before Watergate, and it was filmed in between Godfather and Godfather 2. It's a horror film in the true sense of horror, because what's happening to Gene Hackman in this film is horrific. If you've ever had a difficult work relationship, if you've ever thought people at work are scheming behind your back, or making plans for Nigel, or making sudden plans that don't include you, The Conversation is a film which addresses that quite clearly. It's about paranoia, it's about uncertainty, it's about the human capacity to make the wrong decisions, it's about people looking at the evidence that's in front of them and joining in the gaps and getting it hopelessly wrong. And it's about unseen forces which are working and conspiring to cause harm to others without other people knowing. If you've ever been in a situation where you suddenly think, hang on a minute, I've been trapped, I've been caught, or if you remember from Star Wars The Phantom Menace, when Obi-Wan Kenobi says, we're smarter than this. The Conversation is exactly about that. It's about someone being manoeuvred into a situation where they become paranoid and they become threatened and hunted by people that they can't see and can't touch. And it's a real horror film that ultimately, I don't want to give away the ending, but it results in the character literally losing his mind. 1978 brought Invasion of the Body Snatchers. By the way, this is on Arrow Video. Arrow do fantastic Blu-ray editions, which will have probably interviews with everybody, including the makeup artist and the bus driver. This is the one with Donald Sutherland in it, and Leonard Nimoy, and an early Jeff Goldblum. It's fantastic, and what you will see in a number of these films that I think are horror is around the gap between appearances and reality. And this film is if you've ever, let's talk about it from a slightly different angle. About 1% of the population is a psychopath. That is remorseless, acting without conscience, unable to conceive of other human beings as valid actors in their own right. And these people, these psychopaths, look just like us. They look like humans. They are monsters, but they look like people. And that is a theme that I will come to again and again in horror movies, because you don't know what somebody really is until they show you with their actions. And Invasion of the Body Snatchers kind of takes that theory and turns it into a horror film of no small importance. Also, 1978 saw The Medusa Touch, which is staggeringly unknown. It's a bizarre psychological horror thriller in which Richard Burton lays waste to most of England whilst in a coma in his bed. And it's a police procedural, but instead of being, well, they're tracking down the person that attacked him, what they're trying to track down is him and how much danger he shows to people. So he's got, I think, Kim Newman calls it the best screen work of the 70s. And this is a fantastic film. It's scary as fuck, but it's very low key, very British, very 70s, and very, very interesting. The next one is perhaps probably the most well known of the films which I'm going to talk about here, is The Shining. This is one of my favourite films of all time. It's kind of like Kramer versus Kramer in a haunted house, and to me, it's it's a divorce movie. And it's about human cruelty to each other, and obviously it's got a hell of a lot of ghosts in it, or maybe it's got no ghosts at all. Maybe he's imagining the whole thing. There are two versions of this film to get. There is the international cut, which runs at about 114 minutes, and there is the American version, which is about 138 minutes. Both the director approved. I prefer the longer version because it's got more depth to it. But The Shining is a film that I could talk about for hours and hours and hours. And if you've been in a pub with me, you will know that you've probably said, "Oh God, just shut up about that film." So the next one is what I call, probably probably my number 2 favourite film of all time, The Thing. I think it's obligatory for any man between about the age of about 40 and about 60 to think this film is the dog's bollocks. I wouldn't want to disappoint you in that respect. It's a film about humans and what it is to be human, and how things and objects and how alien life forces that wish to cause you damage can look like humans but aren't. There's about 4,000 different versions of this film that have been released. I have them all because I'm that kind of guy. But very quickly, a couple of things to point out. The best version to get at the moment is the Arrow video version in the UK. If you're in the US, get the collector's edition 2-disc set on Scream Factory that has an alternate cut of the movie in. Otherwise, go for this version. And there's a couple of other bits which I'm going to mention as well. This is an early DVD of The Thing. It has a slightly different commentary track. And this is the Thing with the prequel in it as well. Not essential, but the prequel is just a nice little kind of like taster. We were going into what I regard to be the greatest summer of horror movies ever, which is the summer of 1983. And that whole year was just chock full of amazing horror movies. This one will surprise you, because it is not The Omen. It is Omen 3, The Final Conflict, in which a grown adult version of the son of Satan becomes an American ambassador and a major international businessman, who then faces down against a series of priests that try and kill him in order to prevent the apocalypse. It's the only film I've seen that really kind of addresses and visualises God as a tangible entity with a corporeal form, even though he only appears at the end of the film. And you kind of think, all these films where people are talking about, Satan and the devil, and Satan and the devil, and but you never see the forces of good. And this is one of the very, very few horror films where God, him or herself, or more correctly Jesus, appears and gets retribution. I'm not spoiling the end of the film there. There is an Omen 4. Let's pretend there isn't an Omen 4. Omen 3 is a fantastic horror film. It's cheesy, slightly naff. It's extremely British. It has some ludicrous deaths in it, and it's got Sam Neill as a scenery chewing son of Satan, and it's incredible. I cannot recommend it enough, as long as you do know that it does come with a side order of cheese and extra cheese in it. Another film from the summer of 1983, Michael Mann's The Keep, which has so far only been released on DVD in Australia. Luckily, or more correctly, stupidly, I imported it the day that I realised it had been announced. It's a bare bones DVD of a flawed version of what is undoubtedly an amazing film. The released version of this film is 96 minutes long. It runs like there's at least an extra 20 minutes to go in it, so it's like watching a TV edit of it that has been modified for your TV screen with the content edited to allow them to show more adverts. The Keep is just bonkers, really. It's around a set of German commandos in the Second World War that go to a haunted keep in Romania, and then the SS turn up, and what they find out is that there is something that is really dark and evil that sits inside the keep and feeds upon human cruelty. And the soundtrack is by Tangerine Dream. You might as well just go, it's Mark's perfect movie. But this is an incredible horror film that really kind of sits with you afterwards. You kind of get the feeling that ties in with William Friedkin's idea, actually, that World War II was a case of mass satanic possession of a nation at a time, and that evil just sits and waits and it bides its time, and then it shapes world events. And that's the kind of inference that I pick up from this film, which is far, far better than its reputation deserves. The first David Cronenberg film, in fact the only David Cronenberg film in the list, is The Dead Zone, which has Christopher Walken in it. I love this film. It's staggeringly good. It's around a psychic who is able to see into people's future and able to see the most traumatic event in someone's future when he touches them. And he meets a presidential candidate. And it, certainly around about the time of 2016, when Trump got elected, I could see a lot of parallels between this film and the reality that was happening. It's the kind of movie which you just genuinely wouldn't expect. It would be very difficult to sell. Christopher Walken is brilliant in it. Martin Sheen plays a presidential candidate. Obviously, he later turns up as the actual president in the West Wing. So if you want to get a bit flippant about it, maybe the president in the West Wing is an alternate reality from The Dead Zone. A great movie. Now, this is the second John Carpenter appearance. Although John Carpenter didn't direct it. It's Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. It's bonkers. It really, really is. It's the only Halloween movie without Michael Myers in. It's set on Halloween. It's about an evil plot by a deranged businessman to change the shape of the world. And I just love it. It's got everything in it. It's got Stonehenge. It's got robots. It's got, say, satanic masks. It's got snakes or danger noodles, if you want to call them that. It's got an alcoholic lead character who can't seem to keep his dick in his pants. And by the way, if you match the lead character, Tom Atkins, in this Drink for Drink, you will probably die, so don't do it. It's available in a multitude of cuts, and it's really spooky, weird, bonkers, odd. Now, this is a horror movie I love. I'm going to mention it. I love it for two reasons. One, it's just fucking crazy. Second one, it's got Sir Patrick Stewart's first on-screen kiss, and it happens to be with a man. It is Life Force. This is garbage. It's wonderful, high concept, high budget, utterly bonkers garbage, which originally was called Space Vampires, and that's exactly what it's about. It's about space vampires. It commits to the most ludicrous of concepts, where everything else apart from the concept is played completely straight. So the music, the mise en scene, the special effects, everything is high budget apart from the concept, which is low grade trash. It's wonderful. It's a kind of film that would sink a film studio. It was released, I think, by Canon, and therefore probably did sink a studio. It's a small price to pay. So I love this film, and if you like cheesy horror that's played completely straight, where the stakes are incredibly high but also very lowbrow, It's perfect for you. Also, by the way, it was shot in the oratory, which is next to the Victoria and Albert, which was weird because when I went last time I went to do the V&A, I decided I was going to go into the oratory to see it. And it's so strange seeing a scene from a horror movie that I saw when I was 12 on TV in real life. I'm going to jump forward to 1990 now with Exorcist 3. Just a really strange, odd Exorcist sequel that isn't really a sequel but is set in the same world. Serial killer movie set in the Exorcist world. Now there are two cuts of this film. If you get the opportunity, get the Blu-ray with the director's cut in. The director's cut is superior because it doesn't have shots by people that were in the other Exorcist movies. Strongly recommend it. Here's another one, Hardware by Richard Stanley, kind of like a low-grade British Terminator type movie. I really like it. It has not aged particularly well, but I don't particularly care. Next up from 1992, Ghostwatch. People, I saw this when it was on British television on the 31st of October 1992. I have never been so scared watching a live TV broadcast in my life. It was genuinely terrifying, and my girlfriend of the time could probably attest to that if she remembers that far back, because it is 28 years ago now. This is the first film of or the first TV show which kind of really broke the medium of what was real and made you question, well, is this really happening? Is it fake? Is it scripted? And it's got rewatch value, and it's really just, I love this. And if you haven't heard of it, please watch it. And then just imagine watching it in 1992 where there was no internet and there was no way of checking what was going on, and thinking, wow, they really pulled one on people. It's a fantastic, scary, one of the scariest bits of television that there is. This one will surprise you. What I'm trying to do is to bring out films that I think you may not necessarily have heard of or know or consider as horror movies. Groundhog Day. That's a horror movie. A man is forced to relive the same day of his life endlessly over and over again. The whole thing is played as a comedy, but it's really dark. He clearly goes through times where he's suicidal, where he kills himself many different ways. And it's just really, it's a horror movie wrapped up as a comedy, and it fools almost everyone because almost everybody thinks of it as a comedy where it isn't. Next one is The Others. I don't want to spoil this film. It is a fantastic twist on the haunted house, and it's a really powerful film about grief and loss. I mentioned The Conversation earlier. This is a film that reminds me a lot of The Conversation. It's Michael Clayton with George Clooney. It's fallen a bit under the radar. I tried to get the sticker off here, by the way, it didn't work. It's fallen under the radar a little bit. Total Oscar bait, but it's an industrial business espionage movie, whereas I've mentioned about The Conversation, this also happens to Michael Clayton, where unseen forces seek to unravel his life. And having been in that situation, that is a horrifying experience to have. So we're coming into the last 15 years or so. The Host. Again, a great horror movie. It's part satire, part totally straight movie, part type of Godzilla, part King Kong, part Creature from the Black Lagoon, made in Korea by a fledgling director who then later went on to make Parasite, by the way. It's just, I love it. It's a great movie. It's totally not what you would expect at all. It's all about 50p in CEX when the stores are open. But it's just a really great horror movie which is worth watching. I'm not sure if it's on Netflix. This one, okay, so this is the third of the Stephen King adaptations which I'm going to mention. Please don't be surprised by it. It's The Mist. The less you know about this film going in, the better. What I will say is the ending is different from the Stephen King novel, and it is so different that Stephen King says he wishes he had thought of that. It's a classic haunted house, people trapped in a place besieged by monsters movie, and it's one of the best ones of its type. 2010, again, a lot of people probably don't think about this as a horror movie, and I do, is Black Swan. This is a film about obsession. It's a film where you become consumed by your desires and your pursuits to the point where you lose track of absolutely everything else that is going on around you. And it's got this weird art house feel to it. There's also horror, but isn't at the same time. It's not what you expected at all. Certainly, I saw it at the cinema, and I was like, is this really where I think this film's going?" And like all of Darren Aronofsky's films, it's approximately a laugh a year. So it's not got a great sense of humour, but it's a powerful, searing movie about obsession and compulsion. Now, I know my brother hates this next film. My brother is wrong. This is Cabin in the Woods. And I love this film from 2011 because it playfully pokes fun at all the horror movie genres. And it does so in such a way that it takes you quite a while before you realise, is this film a parody or is it an actual genuine cabin in the woods kind of scary movie thing? It's really, really something indeed. So I'm going to recommend this as well. This is Tucker and Dale versus Evil from 2010. Yes, it's a rental copy. This is a fabulous film about rednecks and a murder rampage in the woods, but nothing as you expect it to do. It's a hilarious, gore-drenched joyride, according to Bizarre. Now, it's got lots of gore in it. It's got lots of gore in it because that's what needs to happen in order for the film to actually take place. But it's so clever in the way in which it kind of subverts the expectations that you have about the film. And going from something that's basically nothing but laughs to something that doesn't have any laughs in it whatsoever. This film is a really tough watch. Okay, so this film comes from 2011. It is called Michael. It is subtitled for those of you that speak English. It's a very tough watch. It's horror in the true sense of horror. You don't see very much horror take place in it. And the more I tell you about it, the less mystery the film has. But it goes to a really, really dark place. And it presents a very banal, straightforward, matter-of-fact approach to a very, very dark thing that could happen. And it's just the kind of film that you watch and go, oh my God. You know, it's not sympathetic to the main character because the main character is a monster. But what it does do is that it presents a version of reality that takes monsters out of the moustache twirling, go compare kind of approach and gives them something a little different. On the flip side, of course, also equally contemporary, one of the funniest films ever made, Sightseers, which has the tagline, death wears a knitted jumper. It's a weird and unusual, funny, dry movie, kind of like Natural Born Killers set in Shropshire type film, that also very, very clearly features some fantastic lines of dialogue. I don't want to spoil my favourite line of dialogue, but it is about the Daily Mail. And it's also really great to see a horror film that's set in a world that I recognise that I live in. So I'm used to seeing horror movies that are set in Europe or in a cabin in the woods, for example, places I don't go and places I don't know. Whereas Sightseers is set in Nottingham, and then it kind of moves on from there. It's a really funny British film, the type of film that probably only British people could actually make. Next up, this is a double set, and these are horrific movies. The Act of Killing and The Look of Silence, which detail both sides from a documentary point of view of a genocide, in which sometimes the people that worked in concentration camps and prison camps and committed acts of mass murder and genocide reenact those events on the spots where it happened or in the countries where it happened and paint themselves out to be the heroes. It's a really dark insight into the human psyche. And next up is The Lobster from 2015. This is a horror movie in a way and perhaps you wouldn't necessarily know, which single people are arrested, they're transferred to a hotel which they can't leave, and then if they don't find a mate in the next 45 days, they're then transformed into an animal of their choosing and released into the woods. It's dark as hell, It's funny, and it's bleak, and it's unusual. And if you've ever been single and not wanted to be single, it kind of really weaponizes that sense of growing older and being alone in the world, and how people kind of use that sometimes against you. You know, there are financial penalties to not being part of a couple. You don't necessarily have the ability to have the same kind of housing or the same kind of leisure standards. You know, you don't have the ability to um, experience some of the things that people that are in couples do, and The Lobster really turns that into a really horrific kind of thing. And it's dark and it's bleak and it's funny and it's weird, and I recommend it highly. Right, going to come to something which perhaps again is for my money the best piece of visual film that I saw in the whole of the 2010s. It is episode 8 of Twin Peaks: The Return. God of Light is the one, and it really is the kind of film that totally blows the world of Twin Peaks apart. So you think, I mean, if you've watched lots of Twin Peaks and you haven't seen this episode, I'm going to try not to spoil it for you. I'm going to try really, really hard not to spoil it for you. But Twin Peaks is you think it's about the adventures of Dale Cooper in Twin Peaks trying to solve a murder, and everything that happens after that. And episode 8 is a 4-part, mostly silent, black and white, ultra high resolution art piece, which travels all through the nature of evil and identity, and it does so in a very abstract, jigsawy fashion that makes you on one hand go, what the fuck did I just watch? And on the other hand, it kind of makes you realise that all evil is connected, and all evil comes from a place, and perhaps all the evil that there is in the world has been caused by one thing. And as I kind of mentioned in an earlier film, The Keep, I strongly believe in the idea that there is good and there is evil in some abstract form, not necessarily labelled God or Satan, but as powers which human beings have, and sometimes they manifest themselves, and there is a world beyond what we can necessarily perceive with our eyes and our ears. And episode 8 takes that all back to the point of origin, and it then makes you kind of realise that perhaps what happened in Twin Peaks wasn't a one-off, it wasn't an aberration, it wasn't a monstrous event by a lone nutter. It was part of a much wider tapestry of evil and control and power that fed upon human misery, that had all been drawn from or released by one event. Any more than that, I'll spoil it, but it completely opens the world and Twin Peaks up. And so I watched it and I was like, God, I thought I knew what Twin Peaks was about. I had no idea. So, coming to the end now, nearly up to the present day. Twin Peaks is 2017. This is Us by Jordan Peele, who also made Get Out. I think Us is a great movie. It's got this huge world of darkness and mystery that sits alongside it. And I don't really want to explain what the film was about, because then, hearing it off me would be nowhere near as good as experiencing it as it's told in the movie. And what a lot of films do these days is they kind of give away the plot, and you end up going, well, what's the film about? Or you kind of go, well, I feel like I've seen the movie, and the joy of understanding the story inside Us is experiencing it the way that it's meant to be told by the director. It's a very unusual film that again kind of addresses some concepts that sit right at the heart of horror. Right, only 2 more to go. I love this film, Midsommar. It's huge, epic, and dark, and weird, and scary, and seductive. And it's the nearest comparison I can make to it is The Wicker Man, but it's so much better than The Wicker Man. And it's a film that really addresses how humans act, how they process grief, how we deal with escapism and maturity and everything that goes with it, as well as about cults and how cult behaviour influences and changes our way of seeing the world. So again, if you want something a little bit weird on your watching, go for that. And there's two more. One is not on DVD, but the one that is Happy Death Day to You. Now, it looks like Groundhog's Day meets Halloween. This film is very, very different. It completely turns the world of Happy Death Day inside out. I thought Happy Death Day was pretty good, but Happy Death Day 2, it does the same thing to Happy Death Day that the Twin Peaks episode does, and that some of the other films which I've mentioned do, is it completely takes the ideas that you had around what you thought you were watching, turns it inside out, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my god, this film has really been thought through. Now, there are some films where you kind of work out there's a bigger story that's being told through the little hints of what's happening in the rest of the narrative. Star Wars is great at that, by the way. Happy Death Day to You actually takes you into it, so it's both a prequel and a sequel at the same time, and it's a really it's just a really inventive approach to the horror genre. I love this film, and I don't care who knows it. I don't care if it's cool or not. I just think this film's much, much smarter than you would have thought. And I would have thought, well, it's just a film about a guy who's a killer and all that. But last one I'm going to mention, we've seen on Netflix, so I know it's on there, is the remake of Child's Play. And I thought the original Child's Play was pretty crap, but the remake is voiced by Mark Hamill, and again it overlays this enormous, wonderful modern day interpretation of the film into something that's very actually a cautionary tale about technology, and it's bloody scary on occasions, light on gore. And any film where you get an opportunity to hear Mark Hamill chew his way through the scenery, I would always strongly recommend. He's one of the finest voice actors on the planet. Nonetheless, don't have the DVD or the Blu-ray. We discovered it very, very recently, and very happy to mention it. So that's just a very quick whistle-stop tour, about a minute each, on about 40 films, horror films, that I really, really rate. And obviously my definition of horror is very different to lots of people's definition of horror, because to me it isn't about a guy in a mask with a chainsaw cutting up screaming women. Horror is about the thing that lurks in the dark part of your head that you only see when you're trying to get to sleep. And that's where I'm going to end it. The next one will be about band t-shirts, because that is what won the poll, but I forgot to mention that I was going to do horror movies first. And you will also know that the backdrop is considerably different this time around. I bought a new light bulb. Woohoo! Go me! That is considerably brighter than the previous one. The setting on the light bulb up there is daylight, and it's much, much brighter than when I was sitting in here in the dark, but I had to wait for the light to go before I changed it, because that's the kind of dude that I am. Next episode will be episode 56. I'll be talking about my favourite band t-shirts and the memories that are associated with those, and the reasons why they are my favourites, and I will obviously see you in future. Usual rules apply. Don't be a dick in the comments, and I will see you again some other time. Hopefully that's been alright. Thank you, and see you soon. Bye, people of the internet and YouTube. Adios. Yes. No, I should just press stop instead of talking like a dad. The problem is I'm a dad, so I've got to make dad jokes, haven't I? And then dad jokes, and I'm going to say, oh God, no, why do you have to do that? So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to stop. See you all later. Bye.